Hey, this is Christoph with Scalar Code. In the previous episode, we went over nginx.conf and how to tweak some of its most important settings. In this episode, we're going to take a look at how to configure static sites. So I am in my nginx directory, and if you remember in the previous episode, we have these two directories here called sites available and sites enabled. We're going to be working in sites available, and then we're going to create symlinks to sites enabled to put our sites live. So let's go ahead and change our directory to sites available. Inside of sites available, by default, I haven't changed anything. We have a default file. And if we go inside of it, as you see, they already have a lot of comments in here, and these really help out. You can also go to the URLs they provide, which give you even more information, pitfalls of things you shouldn't do, quick start and configuration examples, etc. So if you have some free time, definitely go through those. They're very helpful. But let's go down to this server directive. So we have a server context directive, and then inside of that we have simple directives like listen 80, root, index, etc. Let's start with listen 80. This just tells Nginx which port to listen on. So 80 is the default one and corresponds to HTTP. We could have HTTPS or anything like that. It doesn't really matter as long as you're not blocking it with a firewall or something like that. Next to that we have default server. As the name implies, that just makes it the default. We can only have one default per Nginx configuration. So if none of the other, or when a request comes in, if the host in the request doesn't match any server name, which we'll talk about in just a second, then this is going to default to this server block here, and this server block will try to address the request. Right below it, there's another listen 80. This is just for IPv6, does the exact same thing as the one above. Now we have root, which is in this directory we have right next to it. This just tells Nginx where to look for things when a request comes in. And then right below it, it says, look for index.html or index.htm. And here we have the server name, which is what I was just talking about. If the request host doesn't match any server name, this is going to be the default one. But if it, like for example, like curl localhost, then as long as I'm using port 80, and if I curl just localhost, since 80 is default, that would be correct, then this server block will be used. I could change this to my domain name like scalarcode.com or anything really, as long as I changed the hosts file, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. But that just tells Nginx how to route things and when to grab which server configuration, things like that. All right, now going down to the location block. This location block, once Nginx decides which server processes the request, it just tests the URI from the request's headers or header against parameters of these location directives. Now there's only one in this configuration file, but I'll show you in a minute that we can have multiple ones. But anyway, with this location block, we are checking for request matching just /. In this case, it doesn't matter which type, since we have only one location block and it's going to fall back to this one. But if we had multiple ones, I'll show you in a minute that it makes a big difference. So inside of this location block, we have a few comments that help out. We have this try files. This tries the literal path that is asked for in relation to our defined root directory. So as the comment points out, we're first going to look for our URI as a file in the document root. So say I go to localhost /hello.html or whatever. It will look for that in user share nginx html, which is the root we have defined right up here. Now, if it can't find a file, then it's going to look for a directory, which is defined by the $URI /. If it still doesn't find anything that matches, it's going to default to displaying a 404 with the equals 404. All right, so now let's go ahead and just add a block in here, just for demonstration purposes. I didn't mean to do that. All right, so let me add a location. Let's do images. And let's change the root actually, just to show you that we can do that. Let's do uploads images. Okay, and just close it out. Let's just leave it like this. So in this case, if I go to localhost /images /main.jpg, for example, instead of looking in the user share Nginx HTML, just like the location above does it, we're going to look in uploads/images/main.jpg and return it if it exists or not. So as this shows, the more specific location block that matches the request will get checked first. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's kind of counterintuitive at first sight if you haven't really dealt with anything like this before. It's a little bit weird, but you'll get weird results if you're not used to that. So definitely keep that in mind. Okay, so this is a really basic configuration example that I set up here. And as you see, there's more commented out examples to show you what it can do. You can also look in the documentation and things like that. But in a future episode, I'm going to walk you through this passing PHP scripts to fast CGI. I'll show you how that works. It's pretty cool. But for now, let's just leave this configuration file the way it is. This is the default one, and I'm going to curl localhost just to show you that it works. So this is a default page that comes with Nginx, the apt-get install method. I haven't changed it at all, but now I want to create another site on my same server here, and I'm gonna name it scalarcode.com. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do. First of all, I'm gonna make it in user share Nginx. Actually, let's do test.com. Okay, so now I've got that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a simple HTML page, index.html, and say, hi, I am a test. Not even going to bother with tags. Okay, so now we have that. Now I need to create a configuration file in this site's available. So again, I'm just going to do sudo vim, and I'm going to name it test.com. All right. Inside of this, I'm just going to put a server block again, and I'm also going to listen to port 80, just the default port 80. It could be anything else really, but let's just make it port 80. This time I'm not going to put default server since we can only have one default server per Nginx configuration. We're going to need our root, which, if you remember, is user share nginx test.com. Leave it like that, and then we're going to look for index.html or index.htm, and then there's some other ones that we can put on here that I may cover in other episodes, but for now let's just keep it very simple. So I'm going to do server name of test.com, and then let's just have one simple location block, just like the default one, where we're going to do try files URI equals 404. All right, and that should be enough. Okay, so now I need to do a few things, like maybe 2-3 things. The first thing I need to do is change my hosts file. So let's add another line here pointing to localhost 127.0.0.1 test.com. Okay, so this is routing it properly. If I had a domain name, if I actually owned the domain name test.com, then I wouldn't have to do this. But since I don't, I do need to do this. All right, let's exit out of this. And now what I need to do is I'm going to back out of this directory because I need to create that symlink I told you about. And it's very simple. All you do is sudo ln-s excuse me. And now keep in mind, this is really important because it just bit me while I was doing this tutorial where I didn't put the absolute path and it didn't work. I don't know why I didn't do it. I've always done it before. I've done this maybe not a million times, but a lot of times, and I totally forgot and it just would not work. So I spent way too much time on it. All right, so as you see, I have the entire path. Boom. So now if we check our sites enabled, we see we have default and test.com. I'm going to do a simple sudo service nginx restart. And as you see on the right side, it says OK. If it said fail, you could check in your logs, which I think is var log nginx or something like that. It's in your nginx.conf to see what path it's in. And you can also do that in your site's available configuration, so you could have a different log file for each site. Okay, so now I'm going to do curl test.com, hi, I am a test, as you see here. So obviously there's a whole lot you could do with this, and I mean we could even go in and change the ports, for example, if we want to have fun. So we could do port 8080 if you're acting as a reverse proxy, which Nginx is, then you could be passing this to something else at port 8080 or some other weird port 9000, I don't know, whatever you want, and it would still work. And you could change the route. I mean, I could have a different route in my location blocks. I can have all kinds of location blocks if I want. Remember, more specific, get used first if it matches. You can do a lot of stuff, and this is just for static sites, but in the future you'll see that, I'll take you through setting up with PHP FPM, where we're going to use fast CGI to pass the requests using sockets and that sort of thing. So Nginx is really cool. I hope you're having fun with it. I hope you're learning a lot. If you are, or even if you're not, just please leave me a comment and let me know how I can improve, or how much this has helped you and what you've been able to build with it. I really like to hear from the community, so don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks for listening to episode number 3. Have a good one.